Our story started with Irapa Forest, which used to have life and a lot of people living within it. It wasn't just a regular forest in Fortune City or the then Iluoro. However, its end came when King Lajide refused to take his eyes off Amoke, the priestess of Allah. His loss later became the ruin of the village and the end of them all. For a man's desire became the end of different generations. Welcome to Tales from Fortune City, where we bring exciting stories to life. Our story takes place in Iluoro, in the olden day Fortune City. Do remember to like, comment and share this video. Now back to our story. The day that started the mysterious run, the air in the grand hall was suffocating. King Lajide's eyes followed Amoke's every movement during their traditional festival. His desire barely veiled behind the crown. Amoke stood tall and unyielding, a beaded staff clutched in one hand. Her beauty was legendary, her power even more so. For months, the king had tried to win her favor, offering riches, land, and promises of devotion, but Amoke's heart was bound to the gods and not to men. Priestess, King Lajide's voice boomed. I promised a throne beside mine. Together we could rule this kingdom and beyond. Amoke's gaze was sharp as a blade. Your Majesty, I serve a higher purpose. My loyalty lies with Allah, the goddess of the earth. I cannot betray her for worldly desires. The room fell silent. The tension was very visible. A flash of anger crossed the king's face, but he quickly masked it with a forced smile. Perhaps you misunderstand. This is not a request. Rejecting me is rejecting the crown, and the gods will not forgive such insolence. Amoke's lip curled into a defiant smile. The gods see my heart, they know I speak the truth. Humiliated and enraged, King Lajide stood. Then you will see what happened to those who defy me. His words were a promise of doom, for I am like a god too. I represent them on earth, and you have defiled me. Amoke left the hall, her step steady, her resolve unbroken, but she knew the king's pride would demand vengeance, and she began to plot ash in return. King Lajide sat in the grand hall, his anger simmering as his advisor gathered round him. His pride had been wounded, and now Amoke, the priestess he had once coveted, had defiled him. Her refusal to surrender to his advances had enraged him, and now he sought to punish her. He turned to his trusted sorcerer, a tall man whose eyes glowed with arcane power. Bind her powers, the king commanded, his voice cold and commanding. She had embarrassed me and she must be punished. Her strength must be stripped away. The sorcerer nodded, whispering incantation that filled the air with a strange hum. In an instant, Amoke's power was sealed and her connection to the gods severed. The king's punishment was swift. He decreed that she be exiled from the sacred temple, her home for so long, and cast out into the forbidden forest where only the most dangerous spirit roamed. As Amoke was dragged from the temple, she felt the weight of the curse. Dark vines began to creep up her arms, thick and twisting, marking her fall from grace. They were symbols of her disobedience. The king's curse made real. In the depth of the forest, the whispers of forgotten deity echoed in her ears. Alone, abandoned and marked by the curse, Amoke vowed to make the king regret his actions. She would not be broken. Amoke ventured deeper into the forest, the curse on her growing stronger with every step. The once serene priestess had become a shadow of her former self, marked by dark vines that twisted across her arm. It was in this forsaken place, amid ancient trees and forgotten whispers, that she encountered Anikaye. Anikaye was unlike any other being Amoke had ever seen. Her form flickered through light and shadow, an ancient deity whose power seemed to seep from the earth itself. The air crackled with the presence, and Amoke could feel the weight of centuries of bitterness in the deity's eyes. You seek revenge, don't you? Anikaye's voice was a soft murmur, but it carried the weight of unspoken promises. The king's betrayal has awakened something within you, something that cannot be contained. Amoke nodded, feeling the pulse of power stirring within her. A fierce hunger for retribution. Anikaye stepped closer, her ethereal form shimmering. The gods of your kingdom have grown complacent. They feed on people's devotion, basking in adoration, yet they offer no protection in return. The king has wronged you, but he is not the only one to blame. The deities you worship have abandoned you. Amoke's heart raced. It was true. The god had failed her, just as they had failed the people. They had allowed the king's tyranny to flourish unchecked. I offer you power, Anikai continued, a chance to expose the god's flaw and bring ruin to the king. But to do so, you must make a pact with me. You will be the instrument of their undoing. Without hesitation, Amoke agreed. She would tear down the false god, expose their weaknesses, and make them pay for their apathy. The forest seemed to hum with approval as Anikai's power cut through Amoke, marking the beginning of a dark alliance. Amoke's pact with Anikai bore fruit faster than she had expected. She had chosen to strike not at the heart of the kingdom, but at its very foundation, the land itself. From the forest, she whispered a curse into the wind, weaving subtle thread of destruction that would soon unravel the kingdom's prosperity. It began with the crops. The once lush fields, the lifeblood of the kingdom economy, started to wither. The golden stalk of grain, which had once promised bountiful harvest, now turned brittle and brown, as if the very earth had lost its will to nurture. Farmers watched in helpless disbelief as their livelihood crumbled before their eyes, but no expectation could be found. Then came the rivers, the lifeblood of the land. They too began to dry up. The great river that ran through the kingdom heart, once brimming with water, now languished in sluggish, shallow pools. The fish, once abundant, disappeared, and the people whispered on a curse. At the palace, strange omen began to haunt the king. Nightmares plagued his sleep, and a strange shadow flickered in the corner of his vision. Advisors grew anxious, their faces pale as they spoke in harsh tones of the disaster plaguing the kingdom. Fearing for their own safety, they urged the king to appease the gods with greater offering to restore the balance they believed had been broken. But Amoke, watching from the shadow, ensured their attempts were in vain. No sacrifice, no plea could reach the deaf ears of the deities. She had severed their ties with the world, leaving their offerings to rot, unaccepted, unsanctioned. The king's desperation grew, and so did Amoke's resolve. The seed of chaos had been sown. The kingdom would fall, one prayer, one offering at a time. The kingdom's pantheon, once the heartbeat of the land, fell eerily silent. Amoke, hidden in the shadows of the forest, carefully twisted the flow of divine power, severing the connections between the gods and their worshippers. No longer could the priests and priestesses interpret the will of the deities. Their sacred chant fell flat. Their divine rituals yielded only empty answers. The once flourishing temple stood as a hollow shell, its hall now silent, its altar bare of offering. Without the god's guidance, confusion spread like wildfire. The people, once steadfast in their faith, now were lost, unable to understand the omens and signs that once guided every move. They turned to the priest for answer, but all they received was uncertainty. Those who had lived their lives trusting in divine favor found themselves adrift, their faith shaken to its core. The people's fear gave way to anger, and whispers of betrayal began to circulate like poison in the air. At the palace, the king's desperation reached its peak. Consumed by fear and pride, the king ordered mass sacrifices, slaughtering the finest livestock, the bravest warrior, and even children. The blood flowed freely, soaking the temple ground, yet still, the gods did not respond. The kingdom was spiraling into chaos. With each sacrifice, the people's despair deepened, their faith eroded further. Amoke, watching from the forest, felt a dark satisfaction as the kingdom she had once called home crumbled from within. Under the veil of the night, Amoke transformed herself into the very image of a wandering oracle. A robe stitched with symbol of forgotten power shimmered faintly under the moonlight. The scent of incense and earth clung to her skin, completing her disguise. With her face hidden behind the hood, she ventured towards the palace, a place once familiar and now a bastion of her revenge. The queen, weary from the king's increasing obsession with appeasing the silent gods, welcomed the oracle with a mixture of suspicion and hope. Amoke, with eyes that could see into the heart of men, offered a prophecy that struck a chord deep within the queen's heart. The gods are angry, she whispered. a voice like the rustling of leaves. They have taken your kingdom because of the king's pride. His curse upon the priestess Amoke had made him a target of divine wrath. The queen, desperate for any answer, believed the oracle's words. Amoke's dark influence spread swiftly through the royal court. She has spoken of omens and visions that stoked fear and paranoia, all the while carefully planting seeds of doubt in the minds of the king's allies. Whispers of betrayal slithered through the nobles, and once solid loyalties fractured. In secret, Amoke spun a web. She whispered of how the king's unjust curse upon her had angered the gods, and how their wrath now turned the people against him. The king's pride had cost us everything, she told those who would listen. The gods demand justice. Her words sank deep into the hearts of those already wavering in their support for the throne. Soon, the kingdom's court was divided. The king's advisor questioned his judgment. His nobles began to distance themselves, and even the queen, once devoted to her husband, began to doubt his reign. Amoke, though a mere shadow in the palace, had become a dangerous puppet master, pulling strings from behind the scenes. Her vengeance was no longer a distant dream. It was unfolding within the very walls of the royal palace. The king, surrounded by enemies, both visible and unseen, had no idea that the oracle who whispered in his ears was in fact the very one who had caused him. The kingdom's suffering had become too much to bear. The crop had failed for seasons, the river ran dry, and the skies above the palace seemed perpetually grey, as if the gods themselves had turned their back. Hunger and despair spread like wildfire through the street, and whispers of a reckoning grew louder with each passing day. On the outskirts of the kingdom, the first cries of revolt began to echo through the marketplace. The people, their patience wore thin by endless hardship, marched through the palace armed with nothing than the fury of the oppressed. Down with the tyrant king, they shouted. Let him answer for his sins. Amoke watched from the shadow, her heart swelling with satisfaction. The rebellion had begun, and she, as always, was in control. She had carefully planted the seed of dissent, subtly nudging the discontented towards revolt. Her whispers had found their ways into the ears of the rebellion's leader, men and women hungry for change. They did not know it, but they were puppets in her grand scheme. She manipulated them with promises of power and revenge against the king, steering their actions like conductor, guiding an orchestra towards a crescendo of chaos. The mob surged towards the king's gate, their anger boiling over, and Amoke ensured the arrest aligned perfectly with her vengeance. It was not just the king they sought to overthrow, it was the entire system he represented. And Amoke reveled in the destruction of both. Inside the palace, the king sat on his throne, visibly shaken by the growing turmoil outside his wall. His advisor cowered in fear, unable to provide any solution. In desperation, he summoned the court sorcerer, hoping for a miracle that would quell the unrest. The sorcerer, an old man whose mighty magic had faltered in recent years, arrived with an air of grave urgency. His eyes were weary, as though the weight of the world had pressed down on his shoulder. Your Majesty, he began, his voice trembling. The source of your trouble lies within this very wall. The king's brow furrowed. What do you mean? The sorcerer paused, his gaze shifting towards the shadow of the grand hall. Someone here, he said quietly, has turned the god of nature against you. They twisted the curse wheel and incited the people and manipulated your court. It is a curse, but not more than that. It is a betrayal hidden beneath your roof. The king's heart sank. He had ruled with pride, unaware of the treachery that had been brewing in the dark corner of his palace. His eyes darted nervously around the room as if searching for the traitor. But Amoke, the architect of his fall, was already miles away, watching the flames of the revolt rise higher. The sorcerer's warning came too late. The kingdom was on the brink of destruction, and Amoke's revenge was nearly complete. The king sat on his throne. His eyes were bloodshot through sleepless night, his mind consumed with fear and regret. He knew Amoke was behind it all. The whispers had led him to this moment. The kingdom's suffering was no accident, and the source lay in the woman he had spurned. Her presence commanding, yet marked by the dark vine of the curse. Once a priestess bathed in divine light, she now exuded cold, calculated malice. The king stood trembling with anger and disbelief. You, he spat. It was you all along. Amoke's eyes narrowed. Yes, she replied, voice steady. I brought this upon your kingdom because you left me no choice. Your arrogance, cruelty, they forced my hand. She stepped closer. I was once devoted to the gods. When you rejected me and cursed me, the gods abandoned me. They allowed you to strip me of my power. You made me this. The king recoiled, guilt washing over him. I never meant for this to happen, he muttered. Amoke laughed bitterly. It is too late for regret. Your people revolt, your gods are silent, and I stand victorious. She paused, eyes studying him. I will offer you a choice, king. Step down, beg for forgiveness, and save your kingdom. Defy me, and I will unleash the wrath of the forgotten gods. The destruction so far will be nothing compared to what's coming. The king, his heart pounding, knew that this choice would decide the kingdom's fate. However, the king's defiance hung in the air, a final cry of arrogance sealing his faith. Standing tall before Amoke, his chest heaved with pride, but his eyes betrayed the fear gnawing at his heart. He had rejected her plea, and now he would face the consequences. Are we not yet? The king declared. I built this kingdom, and no woman, no deity, no force will be able to put me away from my throne. Amoke's lips curled into a cold smile. No more words, no more mercy. She raised her arms, hand glowing with dark energy, and called upon the ancient power forgotten by the kingdom. Anikaye, she whispered, come forth. Let the wrath of the forgotten gods be known. The air trembled as the earth seemed to quake, and the wind howled in response. A dark presence filled the room. From the shadow emerged Anikaye, an ancient deity, followed by a host of forgotten gods. The king, pale with dread, stumbled back, realizing that the myths were true. Anikaye, Amoke said, I have fulfilled my part of the pact. Now let the kingdom pay. With a flick of her wrist, the gods descended upon the palace. The earth cracked open, columns crumbled, and the king's throne was reduced to rubble. The gods cast him into the ruins, chaining him to the palace wall, a momentum of his arrogance. As the god's wrath spread, Amoke stood tall, her curse lifted. Divine Damada's king vanished, restoring her power. The kingdom crumbled around her. The people's cries drowned by the roar of destruction. The god had spoken. The wrath was final. The sun set over the realms, casting long shadows over the land. Amoke, now the embodiment of vengeance, stood unchallenged amidst the realm. Amoke's eyes, once filled with sorrow and vengeance, now had a glint of something different. A vision of a society where people would no longer be used as pawns by complacent, distant deities. A society where balance, justice, and respect for divine would reign supreme. No longer will the gods sit idly by, feeding on the devotion of the masses without offering protection in return. As Amoke walked into the distance, the wind whispered her name. No longer as a woman scorned, but as a ruler, a priestess, a force of change. Thanks for following us on Fortune City Stories, and do remember to like, comment, and share this post. And always remember that you are very important, because in Fortune City, everyone is very important.